Hey Quilty friends, I'm Shannon with Cottage Designs, and today we're going over marking tools. Everything from chalk to pencils, and we're going to be doing the pros and cons of it. And I've got a couple tips for you if you like using Frixion pens. So come join me. All right, first we're going to go over a couple of rules when you're using marking tools. Rule number 1, always test your fabric. Rule number 2, always test your fabric. Rule number 3, you know it, always test your fabric. We need to test our fabrics because every fabric is going to react differently to our marking tools. And if you guys have noticed, if you've worked with quilting fabric very much, you've noticed designers don't always use the same feel fabric. I mean, like for instance, Corey Yoder's fabrics feel different from Three Sisters fabrics. So that's why I always want you to make sure you test your fabrics on a scrap piece. That way you know what's going to disappear, what's going to erase, what's going to come off before you go marking your whole quilt. Our first segment is our air erasable and our water soluble pens. We're going to go over these together because these generally have the same rules and the same pros and cons. So first thing, when you do pick out a marking tool, say like our disappearing ink, these are our air erasable, which means that they're going to disappear within 24 hours up to 10 days. So every air erasable pen is different. Like the Dritz here says 24 to like 72 hours, so it's going to be 2 to 3 days for it. Your Stoline could take up to 10 days. So they also, the good thing about this is they also can disappear with water. So you can wait and let them just dry out on their own and disappear, or if you're in a hurry, you can use water to get rid of the lines. Now our water soluble, of course, it's not going to disappear with air, it's going to disappear with water. So you're just going to use plain water, not soapy water, to get rid of it. But let's go over some of the instructions on the back. So that way you guys have an idea, because we're always going to want to read our instructions. And one of the things it always says too is always test your fabric, because different fabrics play differently. So they say for the purple, which you've noticed that our air erasable pens tend to be purplish pink, and our water soluble tend to be blue because, you know, water is, we classify as blue. But that way you guys kind of can tell the difference right away from the looks of them. But this is going to tell you too that these are going to be harder to see on your reds and your pink fabrics because of the color of the mark. It does say to mark your fabric lightly. Disappearing ink normally disappears in 48 to 72 hours, depending upon humidity and penetration of ink. Marks can be removed with water if desired, so it does tell us that. Now, this is the same thing too. One thing it does tell you on the air erasable is that they don't want you to use heat on it, so do not iron these. These don't play like the Frixion pens. You don't want to iron these because you'll set the ink in these. And you also don't want to just automatically throw these in the laundry because some laundry detergents react with this and set the ink. So you want to make sure these marks are gone before you actually wash your quilt. This one says, store pen with cap on and point facing downwards. So we can see these two Dritz. Do you see how they're packaged here? So I'll show you here. We've got the little hanging hole here so that, I'll show you back here too, so that our pens will hang with the cap, the point facing downwards. That's because this type dries out quicker. So that's why they want you to store it like this. So that means like if you get home, you're gonna store them, if you have a cup or something, you're just gonna stick them cap end down, so that way they don't dry as quickly. Now the Soluble, it doesn't have that on the instructions, and I've actually had this in my desk for a week just laying regular horizontal, and it hasn't dried out. So it might have different ink in it than your Dritz and stuff like that. But let's see, does this have anything different on the water soluble? It also says do not iron over marks. Some laundry products containing sodium hydroxide and sodium carbonate may set the marks. So if they're not completely removed before laundering, you could set the marks. So we want to make sure we get the marks out first. So one thing I do want to do is I want to show you guys what this looks like. I'm not going to open these two because I don't want them to dry out yet. But we'll do a sample right here so that way you guys can see what the sew line's going to look like. This is a little stencil I have. I'll do some straight lines so you guys can see. This marks so nice and smooth. Oh my, look how smooth that is. So this, I love the feel of this. It just marks so easy. Look how cute. Do you see how quick you can do that? Now remember, we're not going to use iron to take this out, okay? It's either going to disappear, and I tested it, and mine took about 5 days to disappear. It will start disappearing usually within 5 or 6 hours. You'll see the majority of it gone, but it was like completely gone within 5 days. It might be different wherever you live, but that's how you mark these. Now, I'll give you a little tip. You see how I got some ink on my stencils? You can clean this off easily with a magic eraser. If you ever need to clean your stencils, they'll clean easily. But these are really great. I like these. They have a really nice feel to them. And let's see, was there any other cons? I mean, the main con about the water soluble and the disappearing ink is that they do dry out quicker. They have come up with, like, your sew line. I haven't noticed. I mean, it's been a week and I haven't noticed that it's dried out quickly. So they might have changed the ink in that one so that it lasts longer. Oh, and the only other thing is that, like, your water soluble, you're going to have to get your project wet to get rid of the marks. And your erasable, you're either going to have to get it wet or you're going to have to let it dry out for several days. So, you know, if you're in a hurry, you could always take some plain water to get rid of any marks if you want to, or just let it dry on its own. But that's our pros and cons for our air erasable and our water soluble. So next we're going to move on to our chalk. Next we have chalk. So we have chalk pencils here. We have a chalk wheel. There's also chalk pounce pads that you have certain stencils that you use with it where you're pouncing the chalk in. Now typically with chalk you're either going to dust it away or you're going to wash it away, as in using just plain water to get rid of the chalk. These I had not used before, and I tried out the blue on white fabric, and I had to really scrub with plain water. I just felt like, well, if you're going to use blue, you might as well just use the blue water erasable pen to get it out, because I think it comes out easier. Now this, the chalk wheel, that's great for if you're tracing around a pattern piece or something, because it's going to be doing more straight lines, or if you're doing like free motion, kind of just wavy lines. The chalk pencil that I use all the time is this bone chalk. I think that's how you say bone. I think it's French. This one I really like. It's kind of like using a mechanical pencil. So you advance the chalk lead. You're going to advance the chalk piece by pushing the end of it, as you can see, and you can push it back in, and that's how you're going to load it. You load it through this end. So you push in, and then you can push in your new piece. These are very delicate, so you do have to be a little bit more careful than you would with like a mechanical lead pencil filler there. So when you use these, just advance it a little bit. Let me show you. So when you use them, we're just going to advance them a little bit. If you go out too far and you start putting too much pressure on this, that piece, that tip is going to break easy, which can be kind of frustrating. So my best tip for you is just don't advance it very far, and that way it doesn't break on you easy. And you're just going to need a light pressure. Let me show you this. Let's push that back in a little bit. So we're going to do, here, I'll do just some, look how, I am just barely putting pressure. Look how easy that is to see. Can you guys see that? And then we're going to trace around this heart. Look at that. See how easy that is? You don't have to push hard. It's just very easy. And you don't have to use water to get rid of this. You can use a microfiber cloth and just wipe it away, or I just grab usually a scrap piece of fabric and just wipe it away. And it just, look how it just kind of races kind of like on a chalkboard. Do you see that? So that way, you know, you can still see a little tiny bit of it, but it'll eventually all come out. But so that's what I use a lot. When I'm marking dark fabrics, this is what I grab to mark dark fabrics, because it's just so quick and easy, and I can just easily get rid of it even without water. That's what I like. Some chalks, I would have probably a hard time if I was marking a big piece of fabric, like a large quilt. If I was doing a dark quilt that I had to mark a lot of fabric with, because the problem is when I do like free motion quilting or any kind of quilting, I'm going to be wearing the machiners, which these are the little gloves that you wear to help give you some more grip. The problem is as I quilt, so I put these on, and as I'm quilting, I'm feeding the quilt through. My hands are rubbing like all over because, you know, I'm holding the quilt and moving it, and I find that sometimes the chalk, you know, winds up rubbing off. So that's one of the cons of using chalk, is that it's going to rub off if you're doing the free motion with the gloves on and stuff. So I would advise just marking a small section at a time. That way you don't lose your marking so much, because you might get frustrated if you've marked a whole piece and then find, oh, I've got to go back and mark again. I mean, for marking dark fabrics, it is great. It does show up, because your other ones aren't going to show up well on dark fabrics. Do like that for that. Also with chalk, you're not going to use iron. Don't use iron on chalk, because a lot of times that will set the mark too. Some chalk pounce pads will tell you to use an iron to remove it, but that's certain ones that you can use an iron on. Most of them it's water. You just can take it off with water, or like this, you can see it's a small enough mark that you can just brush it off with some fabric scraps or a microfiber cloth. Just like that. See? So that's our chalk. Next we have the Hera Marker. Now I don't know if you guys know about this. This actually is great because it does not need to be washed out or wait for it to dry out, because it's just going to eventually just, all it does is make creases. So it'll eventually just kind of like relax. So I find this works great for dark fabrics. So as you can, well, I was going to say, as you can see, but it is probably really going to be hard for you to see any creases that I put in here. But the idea is that you can create creases. I don't know if you guys can even see that. I didn't think about that. It might be really hard for you guys to see. Well, the idea is it's going to create a crease that you can see to be able to quilt without having to put any kind of mark, you know, like a permanent mark or something. You can use a ruler with it to create a straight line. You can go like freestyle and just create waves like that. Let's see, can you see it well on the white? It's probably hard to see on the white too. I find, for me, these poor old eyes of mine, they have a hard time seeing the Hera marker. Now, other people, these work great for, they love using the Hera. For me, as I'm quilting, I find that the lines kind of disappear as I'm working with the fabric, so it doesn't last long enough for me, and it's harder for me to see exactly where my marks were. So I just wanted to show you guys in case you didn't know what this tool was. That way you have an idea that for doing straight lines, stuff like that, or just something temporary that you need to mark, it's great. Now we have tape. What? You're thinking tape? Why tape? We actually have a 1/4 inch quilting tape, which this is great if you are trying to learn to get your 1/4 inch seam. You can use it for that, or if you want like a really fine 1/4 inch line that you want to quilt, you can put it down. I personally wind up just using the edge of my presser foot to get that 1/4 inch line if I'm wanting to do that. Also, some people will like to use painter's tape as a guideline, because this doesn't have as sticky as a residue as masking tape. I wouldn't advise using masking tape on your quilts because you'll get a sticky residue from it. The painter's tape isn't as sticky, but they'll use it just to mark off straight lines. For me, I'm going to use a ruler and pen, but I just wanted to show you guys the options that are out there that you can use to mark your quilts too. All right, last but not least, the Frixion pen. These handy little babies erase with heat. They are super popular and also super controversial. These pens were invented for use with paper, not fabric. So the problem is, quilters, we are always resourceful and looking for new products in a way that we can use in our quilt room. These handy little babies erase with heat. All of us quilters have an iron in our quilt room, so therefore we can use them, right? But what we need to do is use them in the right way, correct? So these pens, when we mark them, let me show you, they are handy. You can find these handy dandy little pens at Target, at Staples, at Walmart, at Michael's, at your local quilt shop. So why is there a problem with using them? Do you see how easy that was to draw that design? You're going to use your iron on dry setting to get rid of those marks. But the ink in here does not disappear as in never to be seen again. The ink is a three-part substance, so when heat hits it, a chemical reaction happens that causes the ink, they say, to go transparent. I say it goes opaque. It's kind of like a milky, ghosty color. So it is still there, and therefore it will come back when it hits cold temperatures. I did some tests for you all, and of course most of you know the Frixion pen, if you throw your fabric, whatever you've written on, whether it's paper or fabric, if you throw it in the refrigerator, 38, 40 degrees, the ink is going to come back. You will see all your marks just as plain as day as when you first wrote them. And especially if you throw it in the freezer where it's going to be at freezing temperatures. So how do you get rid of it? You can re-iron it again, and try not to let it get cold, or if it gets cold again, you just have to re-iron it. Now, one thing, here's a tip you guys did not know or may not know. If you heavily starch your fabrics first before marking them, which I talked about starching your fabrics in my other tutorial on pressing, which I'll link to that tutorial for you down below. But in that tutorial, I tell you how I want you to starch your fabrics first, get in the habit of doing that. And that will also help protect your fabric, that if you're using Frixion pens or even your erasable and water-soluble pens, if you're using these marking pens, it will help protect your fabric so that when you iron it, and it does its transparent phase, and then you throw it in the washing machine, those marks, when I tested it, they were gone. As in, they did not come back, because I did a test sample on some Lella Boutique fabric that I had, and I marked my design, and then I used the iron to get rid of the lines so that way they went transparent. And then I threw my fabric into the washing machine, washed it on normal setting that I use for washing quilts. Then I put it in the dryer, did my normal setting for the dryer, and then I tested it and put it in the freezer to see if the marks were come back. I left the fabric in there overnight. The marks were gone. They were completely gone. I even held it up to the lights to see there was no marks left. So just so you guys know, starching actually helps to protect your fabric too. And I'm not talking like a light mist. I heavily starch my fabrics. It helped protect my fabrics. Now, we're going to go back to rule number 1. Always test your fabrics, right? Because I do not want you marking a whole quilt and then realizing, oh, the lines didn't come out. I'm not worried so much of the ink coming back, because even if you don't pre-starch your fabrics and you go to wash it, the ink will come back at freezing temperatures, but it won't be as dark as it was when you initially did it. It'll be just a faded line. But the whole idea of putting the marking pen, of using it for marking our stencil lines, is that we are going to be quilting over those lines. So any line that would come back isn't going to be seen because our thread's going to be covering it up, right? So I personally like the Frixion pens. It's up to you. What I want you to do is find the right pen for you. What works for you, okay? Do not feel like you have to use what I say. Use what you like to use. If you've always used the Erasable pens and they work great for you, good, because I like them too. That Soluble pen is fantastic. I've used water-soluble pens. I like them too. It's just whatever's handy is what I wind up using for whatever quilt I'm making. I like the chalk pencils for using on dark fabric. They work great. So I just want you to have the confidence so that you can go out, get the pen that you want, because we are going to be starting doing some free motion quilting, and that way you guys have your pens ready. So there you have it, Quilty friends, our tutorial on marking pens. My favorites are the Soluble Erasable pen, the chalk pencil, and the Frixion pen. So let me know in the comments, what's your favorite marking tool? So until next time, I hope you all have a wonderful day and enjoy quilting. Be sure to like and subscribe. Bye-bye. And the pens, Right again. Last. Oh,
Take 17.
I need a drink of water. I get a drink of water.